Okay, so welcome. Thank you, Maggie and John, for making this all happen and there's 73,000 steps involved. That's an underestimate, I think.
Yeah, it's 73,000.
So I'm Kristen Croyle. If we haven't had the pleasure yet, I'm the Dean for Liberal Arts and Sciences and a clinical psychologist. And we're going to start with intros because that's the good way to start. So let's say, since we'll have a slightly larger group, let's just do name and affiliation. And if there's something you're really looking forward to for the beginning for spring semester, you can share that real quick too. So I'm going to call on you to make it faster. So let's go with Carolyn and then Preeti and then Tom first.
I am an adjunct in the math department. This coming up on my third or fourth semester. And the topics of all these sessions just sound great. And, toying with some different things for motivational ideas for the students. I teach freshmen, first semester freshmen for the most part. So this looks interesting.
Great. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Preeti Tripathi. I'm the chair of mathematics. And I can see math is very well represented. We are always looking for ways to motivate our students. So thank you, Kristen, for doing this.
Thanks. And Tom, you're next.
Good morning, everyone. I have been teaching for more years than I will ever care to admit. And it does seem to me, my hypothesis is that a lot of it has to do with mobile phones, and the time students spend on them. But I do find that the commitment level and the motivation levels of my students are so different on average than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And yes, I admit 40 years ago. I've been teaching forever. And it concerns me, and I try different things. I'll tell you what I'm doing for this semester, which is a real experiment. I completely redesigned my courses this semester, every one of them, and I am not using a textbook. I'm not using a textbook. I created my own, what I call iBook, and I spent unbelievable number of hours doing that for 3 different courses. But I did it. Well, I'm going to add to it as we go through. It's not available to the students except for my online courses. I'm talking about my face-to-face courses, and I want to motivate them not only to come to class, but maybe pay attention. That's what's been bothering me. By going back to the old days and lecturing more. And in a sense, if they want to do decently in the course, this is not the best way to motivate, but listen to me and take notes. I will add a bunch of stuff from the web, but not until after we've discussed some material. I better be quiet now. But yeah, motivation has been a big issue with me, and the lack thereof on a lot of my students. Not all of them, but an awful lot of them.
Thank you, Tom. Rasika and Dinu and Josh next.
Hi, I'm Rasika Churchill, and I'm from Math Department too. I have a course that coming up in this semester. I think last time I taught that one 2019. So I'm like kind of picking a different textbook and planning on doing some of the kind of independent, like little mini projects. That's the plan right now for that, 300 level abstract algebra class. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Dinushani Senaratne. I am also from Maths Department, so I'm assistant professor there. And this is my second semester. So next semester, I have to teach one new course, that statistic and society. So I'm planning to some restructure that course because I got some information from that previous instructor and she did that in different ways. So I'm planning to do some restructure thing in that course. So I hope this workshop will help me to get some idea about how to do that restructuring and how to handle students, basically. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Josh McCowan. I wear a lot of hats around here for this purpose. I'm an instructor in the Global and International Studies program, and I'm looking for ways to get better. Hopefully, if I can, get some better class discussions going, and not necessarily having the same half dozen people do all the talking, but rather get more people involved more consistently. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And for those of you who are just joining, we're doing quick intros, just who you are, what department you're in, and maybe if you want to share something quick about what you're looking forward to this next semester. So next, Grace, Jessica, Sue.
Good morning. Happy New Year. My name is Grace Maxon Clark, and I work for the Educational Opportunity Program. It's good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Hi everyone, Jessica Harris. I am in the Department of Health Promotion and Wellness, and I'll also be taking over for Casey Raymond while he's on sabbatical for the honors program in the spring, and that is what I'm looking forward to. So hopefully finding some new ways to help motivate in that realm as well.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, I'm Sue Whitmer. I work in the Advisement Center and I also teach freshman class. So I can kind of echo pretty much what everybody else has said.
Great. Okay, next, Sarah, Daniel Wood, and Natasha.
I'm Sarah O'Shea, and I'm a librarian at Penfield Library, and I'm looking forward to this semester having more instruction experience. I'm very interested in motivation in terms of the one-shot class, not being in front of the same group for an extended period of time. So looking forward to it.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Wood. I teach audio recording and production for the music department. I'm interested in trying to help students get more, I guess, internally motivated as opposed to externally motivated. Hoping to prepare students to go into the recording industry where being highly internally motivated is a requirement. Thank you.
Hi, Natasha Daniels. I'm actually joining you from Alfred State. So thank you, Oswego, for, it's great to be here. I love that you're doing this. So I've been a success coach here at Alfred for 7 years, some work in central advising, but I'm most looking forward to this semester. I moved to our vocational School of Applied Technology. So it's a shorter commute for me. I will continue my success work, but getting even more into career. It does mean I'm not teaching my transition. I taught a lot of transition in and then also like capstone exit transition for our interdisciplinary majors. But like Sarah said, I will be building kind of integrated career wellness success curriculum with all of our faculty here. So I'm excited for the one-off, how do I build those relationships and help them stay motivated when I'm not their everyday faculty.
Great, thank you. Morgan, Kate, and Carrie.
Hi everyone, I'm Morgan Bond. I'm one of the librarians over in Penfield. I'm just interested to hear all the techniques that I can possibly use in the one-shot classes that we do here in the library. Like Sarah said, we see the students for a very brief period of time. I'd like to find out ways to engage them a bit more.
Hi, I'm Kate Sullivan, and I'm with the School of Business. I teach business law to business majors and minors. And I started as an adjunct, and now I'm full-time. This semester, I'm now teaching 3 online classes and 1 in person. So I'm looking for some ways to motivate on both formats. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Carrie Mosick. I'm one of the instructional designers on campus, and I am looking to hear about what the students need at this point. So I'm just here to listen.
Great. And for those of you who have just joined, we're doing quick intros, name, what department you're in, and maybe something that you're looking forward to this semester, if you want to share. I think we're on Sarah and then Jackie, and then we already did Kate. Oh, you're changing your orders on my screen. To Kate, we did Carrie, to Holly. So Sarah, Jessica, and Holly.
Hi, everyone. I'm in the Atmospheric and Geological Science program. Just finished up my first semester at Oswego, and I'm kind of reflecting on how that went. I was teaching a large seat intro class and found myself kind of pulling my hair out trying to get them engaged and doing everything possible. And other than like doing a dance with a tiny hat, it was very hard to get them engaged or get at least the back half of the room engaged. I always had kind of the front crew. So I'm kind of interested in finding some new methods and some new ways to get them to engage.
And I already went.
Ah, yes.
I think it's me you meant.
Yes. Did I say Jessica? I'm sorry.
Jackie Wallace, I'm over in career services. I also teach a couple of exploratory courses. I have a quarter course coming up in the spring, which is focus on strengths. And I taught it for the first time last year, and it was a really neat, engaging class that I found that having it as a quarter versus the class I teach in the fall, which is exploratory for first-year students, they kind of drop off mid-semester. I'm like, there's something here. We just implemented too, using True Motivate to have them reflect upon their own motivations and stuff too, which has been interesting, reflecting and learning more about what they identify as motivating them too. So I'm looking forward to hearing some more.
Right. And if you feel so inclined, you're welcome to drop a link. I know Jackie's full of resources, so if you have anything for True Motivate, you're welcome to drop something in the chat. Holly, go ahead.
Right. Good morning. My name's Holly Stone, and I work in campus events and conference services. I do not teach any classes currently, but I'm working temporarily with our student event staff that staff the Welcome Center and do a lot of our setups, and looking to take a more kind of curricular approach to their training and engagement. So I'm here to learn. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. Now, for the folks who are off camera, I know some of you may not have voice access right now. If you want to share in the chat your intro, thank you for to Abby for doing that. Or if you want to say hello real quick. Here's your chance.
Hello, Douglas Hemphill, one of the other instructional designers on campus. Similar to Carrie, I'm just here to listen and see what's going outside of my own little box.
Thanks, Doug.
Hey, this is Eric Blanchard from Political Science. I guess I just thought the discussion might help me sort of gather my thoughts about what kind of strategies to use, what people are seeing on campus, and that kind of stuff. So thanks.
Hi, I'm David Kreider from Broadcasting Communication Studies, and something exciting about this semester, I'll be teaching my first grad course this semester, so I'm really excited about that. But I am definitely looking for motivational strategies, as I have found, especially my 200 level students have just had their motivation and participation fall off these last couple of semesters. And I'm wondering what I can do besides perhaps not having the class at 3:55 in the afternoon to shore this up.
Thank you, David. And Maggie and John, say hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Good to see everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Tell us what departments you're in case folks don't know.
I'm in criminal justice.
And I'm in economics.
Excellent. And welcome to folks saying hello by chat, and Dr. Zhang from SUNY Brockport. Excellent. And Abby from SUNY Delhi. You are very welcome. So as I said, I'm Kristen Croyle. I'm the Dean for Liberal Arts and Sciences. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been teaching for a long time, and I love teaching. I love students, and I actually love motivation too. So the genesis of this idea was actually a conversation with a math faculty member who is not in this room, who I consider to be an extremely talented teacher, as well as a number of conversations last fall where we've got such talented faculty, and you know what it's like. You're doing the things that you were doing and they were working, and then they weren't working anymore. And it can be difficult sometimes to come up with creative ideas when like stuff had worked before. So my thought was, let's talk about different ways that you can motivate students as a way to reflect on, like, I'm doing these 6 things really well, but here's another 3 choices that I could maybe think about that might inject some energy into my class. So we're going to start with a self-assessment. I'm putting it in the chat. I'm trying to put it in the chat. It's spinning. There we go. So this is just a Google form. It's anonymous. This is just to give a moment for self-reflection, and then we'll look together at potentially also at some of the results. So there's 12 questions, and the idea is imagine yourself as a student in one of your courses from last semester. So the questions are written as student reflections, and I know you're just imagining, but that's okay. Just imagine yourself as a student and fill it out with that perspective. So I'm going to put myself on mute while we do this.
I can't get the form to open. I don't know if anybody else is having problems.
Thanks, Preeti. Let me take a look. Okay. Let me try the link one more time.
I think that worked, Kristen.
Okay, most people have submitted responses, given the number that we've got. So I'm going to say a few preliminary things, and then we'll take a look. Let me share. So just my few preliminary things to say, a few thoughts about student motivation before we get into the details. You can see my slide, yes? Give me a nod. Thank you. So first, motivation is heavily influenced by environmental contingencies. We like to think of it as something that a person brings with them from context to context, but it's actually much more likely to be the context that you arrive in influences your motivation. Now, yes, students do bring different motivations with them to class. They also bring other constraints, like constraints on their time, stressors, and skill sets. But we could spend all day talking about issues with students and strengths of students, but that's not going to help us design our classes much differently than we currently do. So instead, we're going to focus on what we can control as professors. We could also spend the next hour talking about the research on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. It's not that relevant, honestly. If you want to talk about it a little bit, we could. But instead, we're going to focus on class structural components that can reinforce both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes more internally, like the motivation to learn something new. Extrinsic motivation comes more externally, like the motivation to earn points or to have the approval of your professor. And there is nothing magical about student motivation in class. Nothing magical. The same exact factors affect human motivation for all kinds of behavior change. They influence our motivation in order to make changes in our own lives. And for me, that's actually a really important point. It's so important that we're going to keep talking about it over and over. And I'll provide some examples of how each of the different motivational levers that we're talking about might show up in other areas of our lives. The reason this is important is that all of you are skilled at making changes in your own lives, and you can apply that knowledge to your classroom and the knowledge of what you're doing as a professor in the classroom to making changes in your own lives. So let's take a look at the trends in our responses. I will open it up. So a clear pathway, I think, was present in most of our perspectives. Critical activities were required, also mostly present. Small, frequent goals and feedback, still averaging around a 4. Optimal challenge, a little more spread, but still averaging around a 4. Engagement, I'm frequently engaged in this class. That's got a lot more spread. So maybe we should spend a little bit more time talking about that. Control, I have the capacity to exercise some control. Also a little more spread. Peer social, look at that one. That's almost a normal curve. Peer social motivation has a lot more wider distribution. Professor social motivation stands out with a 1 there, but still around a 4. Positive environment, lots of great endorsement of a positive environment. Personal relevance looks very similar to our first few questions. And you notice as you were filling them out that there was a lot of overlap between some of them, right? That's okay. It's not like a psychometrically sound scale. This is just a quick self-assessment to get us thinking. Opportunity for a reset, some distribution there, but a fair amount of people using that. And curiosity and variety, a little bit more spread, especially more people answering 2 on this, but still an average around a low 4 there. So thank you. Thank you for taking some time to look at that. So let's look at each one. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to spend just a few minutes, since there's 12, talking about the different things that we can do to influence each one and share some other ideas potentially. So a clear pathway. This one was so important that I included 2 questions on it. I know what I need to be successful in this class. So what are different ways that you can share a clear pathway beyond the syllabus, right? Ideally, the syllabus should be clear. Assignment rubrics, sharing assignment rubrics in advance is a good example of a clear pathway. So when you say, this is what I want you to do, you're actually saying, this is what I want you to do, not this other thing that you think it might be, actually this, shared in advance, so it's clear. Another example of a clear pathway is explicit instructions on how to prepare for class. So if you expect students, for example, to do their reading in advance and skim their notes from the previous class before class starts, they're not going to know that unless you tell them. So explicit instructions on how to prepare for class. So a clear pathway is not just these are the assignments, these are the dates, and here is the grading scale. A clear pathway is like, these are the behaviors that you do to be successful in this class. So here's my out of class example. If you're trying to cook more of your own food instead of eat out more, you need to know some of the basics of how to cook, how to follow a recipe. Plus, you need to think through what you're going to do when you're going to shop, when you're going to prep, how you're going to fit that into your schedule. So it's not just XYZ, it's a whole bunch of other things, that kind of clear pathway. As you have other ideas, you're welcome to share them. You can either drop them in the chat, which actually might be a little hard for me to see because I like to work off a tiny screen. Or if you have a critical idea, we can put it on at any point. But each time I'm going to have a little blue highlight here of something else that we can think about in our own lives. So what about clear pathway? This one is so critical, I made it its own question, that critical activities for this class were required by the professor and not optional. This is something that I think a lot of faculty are sometimes surprised when their students don't do things for class that the faculty member knows they can't be successful if they don't do them. So reading is a really great example, or homework practice. If the professor says, if you want extra practice, do these problems. Who's most likely to do the extra practice problems?
The students in the class.
The A students might do them. The B students who want to get an A might do them. And like, you'll get a little smattering of a few others, but what you really want is the D students to do them, right? And most of them will not, because what you said was, here's something extra. They have lots of things going on in their lives, and they don't realize that when you say, here's something extra, what you really mean is, if you want to pass this class, you got to do this stuff. So instead of suggesting, make it required. Similarly, I've talked to several faculty on this campus, in contrast to my previous campus, which was a lot larger. So this campus, we have more faculty that emphasize office hours a lot more. And then when you have a smaller number of students in class, you can do that. But there are a number of faculty on this campus where attending office hours really is a requirement, but it's not a requirement. So they say things like, if you didn't do well on this last test, if you got a C or below, you should see me in office hours. How many students do that? 0. Maybe one. But what the faculty member really means is, if you got a C or below on that test, you better see me, because if you don't see me, you're going to fail. In which case, attending office hours is required. But they haven't used the word required, so the student doesn't recognize that it's required. So if it's critical, require it. That also helps to shrink equity gaps, by the way. Students who come to college with a less rigorous high school preparation often don't recognize which extra behaviors are actually not extra, they're just required. So here's an out-of-class example. If you're trying to overcome sleep procrastination, which is where you put off going to sleep even though you know you should go to sleep, putting your phone or device in another room rather than by your bed is a good strategy, because you're essentially requiring yourself not to use the phone. And yes, is it really required? No, because you could go in the other room and get it. Similarly, if you tell a student coming to office hours is actually required, and I'm going to harp on you until you make that appointment, yes, they could still blow you off, but it is a much stronger message of requirement. Okay. So far, so good? Okay. Small, frequent goals and feedback. This is a long endorsed strategy for great pedagogical design, that there are frequent opportunities in the class to practice, to get feedback, and to receive reinforcement for positive gains. So that means frequent small stakes graded work that is returned promptly. It's actually one of the most strongly supported strategies for great teaching. And both positive and negative feedback should be specific. You did great here in this way. This is an area where you can work on. This is what's wrong with it. This is how to make improvements. And sharing your rubric in advance and then giving it back soon after the assignment is completed is an easy way to do both of these things. In talking with students who have complaints about instructors, particularly complaints about instructors where they just think the instructor isn't very good, as opposed to being like really mean or something. Their complaints often are around not having enough graded work and not getting the graded work back in time, because these students want to learn. They want to learn, and if you don't give them their work back in time, they don't have an opportunity to see where they can make improvements. So my out-of-class example here is about starting an exercise routine, and that works much better if you have short-term goals like daily goals or weekly goals that are very specific, like which activity you're going to do, how many minutes you're going to do it, and then you track during the week and say, oh, look, I had this goal, I met it by this time, and then you can celebrate and say, yay, I met that goal. Just like your students can say, look, I did pretty well on that assignment. I can get better. We're going to take a pause after number 5. So just if you're thinking. Optimal challenge. I know this class may be challenging, but I have the capacity to be successful. It's not so hard that I can't do it, and it's not so easy that I don't care to do it. You can build an optimal challenge through scaffolded assignments, like here's these steps. So this is very common in research writing focus classes, where instead of saying, we're going to start with a 5-page research paper, they say, we're going to start with a library orientation. Then you're going to find 3 resources that are relevant to your topic, and you're going to submit those 3 resources with like a little couple sentences about what you thought about them, what was in them, an annotated bibliography. So scaffolded assignments, pre-tests or other learning pre-assessments so that you can set your teaching strategy. Say I did this pre-test with the students. They just have no idea at all about this part of the knowledge that I consider to be basic prereq for the course. So I'm going to start there with my teaching instead of starting where I thought. My out-of-class example here, there was a walking challenge in the fall. Some of you may have done it for faculty and staff. Ring a bell? No? That's okay. I did not do it either. And the reason was, I was like, okay, I should walk. And then I saw how far it was. Walking challenge was really a good stretch goal for people who were trying to exercise more. And I just did not have the time. It was too much of a stretch for me. And instead of walking less, which would have been a perfectly reasonable response, because nobody cares if I did this walking challenge except me. I didn't do any of it. I didn't walk any differently than I usually would, because I looked at how far it was and thought that is beyond my capacity right now. So I just didn't do it at all, which can happen with students as well. They can lose heart if they think the class is just far too much of a stretch for them. Sarah has a question in the chat, by the way. Do you have any suggestions for frequent small stakes graded work for a large class? Yes, I do, but let's see if anyone else has a suggestion first. If you got a suggestion for Sarah, put it in the chat.
If you could type in, use it.
I know everybody's typing, so we have to wait for a minute. We got a lot of class clicker question ideas. That's excellent, excellent. So that's feedback doesn't always have to be graded, but they need to be able to have feedback on whether or not they're being successful. So iClicker questions, the advantage there is that they're graded. If you want to even go lower stakes, you can go with essentially poll questions in class. You put up like a multiple choice question on the screen, have everybody respond through Clicker or not, and then they know whether they have the right answer as well as you. You can also, although it's, you can also go with sampling grading. So if you have weekly assignments in a large class, you have 4 weekly assignments over 4 weeks, you can sample one of them to grade. So that way they're engaged and they're getting some feedback. It may not be the volume of feedback you'd like to do, but if you want to combine it with iClicker questions, then you've got both daily feedback and then like some more extensive written feedback. But good question. So let's look at engagement. I'm frequently engaged in this class. You remember this one. This was our normal curve where people had a lot more distribution. I know that if I'm behind, not prepared, or not paying attention in class, it usually won't go unnoticed. Everybody's allowed to zone out a little bit, but not much, right? If I'm prepared and paying attention, it will pay off. I have a reason to stay engaged. So this one, there's a lot of stuff in this question, which is why it's so long. It even includes in-class engagement as well as out-of-class engagement. If I'm not prepared, my faculty, somebody's going to notice. So one suggestion here is reading checks at the beginning of a section of work or a beginning of class, so that if you're expecting reading and they haven't done it, they'll know that it's going to become apparent. They can't just skate by. Additive material in class, not redundant with homework or reading. This is a trap that is so easy to fall into. You expect your students to be prepared in a certain way. You find they're not prepared, so you just do it all in class. Sometimes there is a reason for that, and part of it has to do with not being able to move forward. Part of it has to do with being compassionate with your students. But if you do it frequently, the message to them is they never need to be prepared, right? Because you're always going to cover the same material. And the students who are prepared find out it was a waste of their time. So having additive material that isn't redundant. In active engagement in class, active lecturing is a possibility with discussion or activity questions every 10 to 15 minutes. If you tend to go longer than about 10 to 15 minutes in a straight lecture, students will rapidly disengage. And this is also a trap, by the way, because they won't appear disengaged. They'll keep writing stuff down. They'll keep nodding at you. And the A students will smile and maybe laugh at your little joke, you know, like they're kind of listening, but their brains are off, just off. So having frequent interruptions in anything that you're doing in class so that you can re-engage their attention, even if that's with a personal anecdote that interrupts lecture. If it's relevant to class, don't just tell random person anecdote. Nobody likes that. Students don't even like that. A different type of example, a think, pair, share question, 1-minute video that illustrates something. Any kind of interruption helps to re-engage that attention. Here's a out-of-class example. You're trying to learn a new language. It takes really active practice and effort. This is one reason why some of the self-guided electronic programs really don't work very well. There are many reasons, but one reason is that it's easy to feel like you're engaged. You're reading the thing, you're watching the video, but you're actually not talking to anybody. So that kind of active language practice, you're just fooling yourself and thinking you're getting increased language learning when you're really not. Okay, let's keep moving. Control. I have the capacity to exercise some control over my learning, focus, activities, or pacing. Control is one of the strongest factors in motivation, that if you can exercise some control over the thing that you want to change, you're much more likely to be engaged in changing it. So, for example, I have 2 children, and when they were little, one of them is very self-motivated, but highly resistant to external control. So if I said something like, your room is getting kind of messy, how about you clean your room? Or can you make your bed? Or something like that, immediately all activity would cease entirely. because she wanted to exercise her own control over it. We also know things like if you give patients in a nursing home control over their environment, even things like giving them a plant to take care of or some control over the activities that they do, they live longer. So control is really important in the way that we interact with our world and the way that we think about how interested we are in doing things. So how can you give students control over what is happening in the class? They can be small things like an opportunity to choose a type of assignment or a topic in an assignment. An opportunity just to choose the pacing can make a huge difference. This is especially true in online classes, by the way. Partly because people like to have some control, but also partly because their lives can be kind of complicated, like they're trying to juggle a job and maybe childcare or something. And if you say, here's this assignment, I've released it Friday, it's due on Monday, somebody who works a weekend job is not going to be able to do it, and they're going to be mad, or they're going to stay up all night and try and get it done. Whereas if you say, here's this assignment, I'm releasing it Friday, it's due next Friday, you got a week, you can choose when to do it, you can choose when to engage, you can choose when to do your discussion questions. They're going to be more interested and excited. And my other out of a class example, you want your child to try some new vegetables, let them pick some out, some new ones out and help prepare them, gives them some control. Peer social motivation. My fellow students know who I am and I know them. If I miss class or seem lost, they will care. They will treat me as a valued member of the class. So this is something that y'all said is something that you may struggle with and is actually really easy to build into class. So my goal when I teach is to have noisy classrooms. I want it noisy when I walk in before class starts. I want people to be talking to each other. And if that's happening, I know that there's peer connection, because if they're not talking to each other, there's no peer connection. So you can build that in by starting with peer-to-peer contact on the first day of class and just maintaining it throughout the class, throughout the semester. One way to do that is think, pair, share, and just make sure you ask them to introduce themselves at the beginning of the think, pair, share, because otherwise they'll forget. They'll be like, I don't know who that person is I just talked to. But if you say, oh, that's Jeff, his major is blah, 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 then they kind of feel like they know each other and they can build on that. Another way to build it in is stable teams, where you say these 4 people are going to work together all semester. It doesn't have to be on significant assignments. It can be like you sit together, say hello to each other at the beginning of the class. At the end of class, always check in about what's due the next day. They can just be support teams. They don't even, you don't like no paper due together or anything like that. Just a little check in at the beginning, check in at the end, like what's due, where do we find that resource? Just a little social support. But also it's a really good idea to include just a bit of social skills training in class. And that includes things like, oh, when you talk to your team members, make sure you're turn to them, make eye contact, say hello, and use their names. I don't mean like a lot of social skills. I mean like a tiny, tiny little bit. And my out of class example is having a walking partner or an exercise partner. Supports a new exercise habit, because instead of feeling like you're just going to let yourself down if you don't do it, you feel like you're going to let them down too. And this doesn't just relate to like coming to class and persistence over time. Think, pair, share is pure social motivation to think in the moment. If you say, think about this thing for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to ask you to talk to someone else about it, then they know that the other person, they have to tell somebody what they thought of. And it can be, where do you start on this problem? What would be your first step? Now talk to the person next to you about whether you chose the same approach. A little peer social motivation. Professor social motivation is about you knowing who they are and caring about them, which includes things like knowing and using student names. And students, they like it. I mean, they really do. We all like it if people use our names. But honestly, it's not that important if you remember them. It's much more important that you use them. So that means if you just really struggle with learning student names, use name tents. And it still works. And if you look at them, just like on Zoom, if you're like, I know that person because their name is right there on the screen. Use name tense. But also treating students fairly and respectfully. If you slip into a disrespectful tone with students, you will immediately lose trust with some of them, because being vulnerable in that learning environment is so difficult that if you communicate that you're not going to be respectful and professional with them, they take it to heart really quickly. A positive environment. Folks said they were doing awesome with that. So we'll just highlight that a good way to set a positive classroom environment is to set classroom expectations at the beginning about how you're going to talk with each other, and exercising unfailing respect to students and expecting that of them. Also, if you have a classroom situation where you want to encourage some friendly competition, that can be motivating for students. But if you encourage intense competition, where like if you get points, they lose points, and like these people are great, and now we're going to look at this stupid answer that this other group wrote, that will reduce motivation over time in your class. Personal relevance. I'm just checking the time, which you said you were doing well on. Assignments or examples relevant to student career goals can help. Class material inclusive of diverse voices can help. Opportunity for a reset. This is really, this can be super helpful. This is one of the reasons why New Year's resolutions are so helpful, by the way. I know we don't stick to them very often, but people keep setting them. And it's because they're like, you know what? In October, November, and December, I was really bad at this, but I have a chance for a new start now, now that it's January. And if you can do that periodically in class, you know, the first part of the semester may have been rough, but you still have a chance. We can take a different approach here. And that can include grading schemes that allow makeups or recovery. If your grading scheme is cumulative, where if they got Fs on the first couple assignments, there's really no way to recover from that in terms of the course average, then it can be discouraging to stay engaged. And like, why would you? They're going to fail. But if you have a grading scheme that allows them to show competence over those things that they hadn't previously succeeded at, then there's a chance to recommit and improve motivation at that point. And then curiosity and variety. Every day is not the same. So doing things like posing teaser questions at the beginning of class, like here's 3 questions you might have, or here's like a novel question you might want to think about. Let's figure out how we're going to approach that from this field. Or using different pedagogical techniques during the semester. A mix of lecture, an activity, some review, maybe a scenario-based day, like here's these 3 scenarios we're going to work on that are relevant to what we're talking about. For those of you who are talking about single day connections with students, like from the library, so several of these things are directly relevant. You could make sure you use student names by having name tense. You could break up your hour you have with the students into small segments, inserting different activities or questions at different points. And you can engage curiosity and variety by posing maybe 2 or 3 teaser questions at the beginning. Like, what do you think about these 3 things? One thing to be aware of is if you pose questions to students either as teaser questions or as intermittent activity questions that are way too easy, no one will answer, and they'll get irritated. And you can tell because no one will answer. Because they'll know if you say, what do you think about this thing that is such a super easy question that literally anyone you ask on the street will know the answer, they'll know it's not a real question. So try to avoid those. So let's take 1 minute. I'm double checking the chat. Yes, Abby says she loves stable groups. It is a great idea. You can mix them up in different ways, but anchor groups allow for quick breakouts and tasks that have comfort and interaction. That is a great idea. And I'm going to ask you one question now, which is called a commitment device. Let me stop sharing real quick. If you were to consider adding one different strategy or one different technique, what might that strategy be? And all of you may use all of these strategies. You can just think of it more as, if I were to think more about using one strategy, which one might it be? And drop it in the chat. I see some good responses. The support team. Okay, if you want to do a support team, by the way, you could show up tomorrow. We're going to talk about cooperative learning. I forget what time, but it's in the morning sometime. And we can talk more about teamwork and building in strong teamwork. More scaffolding, application of personal experiences. That's a good idea. And I'm going to drop 2 links for you in the chat. So the first one is, if you have 1 minute to do some feedback, I would love your feedback. And thank you, Maggie. The cooperative learning one is at 9 o'clock tomorrow. And also the presentation is available. I have shared that in that second link as well. So thank you all. It's a pleasure to see you. I'm sorry we went so fast, but hopefully you got some ideas. You could say, I'm doing all of these things. This one though, this one here, maybe I could use that lever a little bit. And if you want to, by the way, I asked, have any of you used the new Bing image generator? It's fun and it's free. So I asked it to generate an image that could be used in a presentation about motivational levers. And although there are no physicists in the room, I thought it was really funny that apparently the image generator does not know what a lever is. So it gave me 20 different images of gears. So I thought you would like that. No levers, just gears, lots of gears. So thank you. It's good to see all of you. Good luck this spring semester. I will hang around for a minute, but I expect Maggie and John will take us out soon.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Kristen, everyone.
Okay, well, that's what I get for doing a 2-hour presentation in 1 hour. Next time,
You had a lot of
shorter.
content there, yeah.
It was
Sure.
good. It was
turn,
good. Yeah, good content, good turnout.
How's it going so far?
It's going. It is now going.
We have some tech issues in each room, but yes. But that's expected. That happens pretty much every time in January, so.
Yeah.
And CTS was shut down. I did text Sean though about 8 o'clock this morning, and he came in and he did get some people to start making things work, so.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Important. So.
Good to see you both.
Yeah, it was good to see you. See you tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye.
I stopped the recording. Oh, you did. Oh, you didn't. Okay.
I guess
Yeah,
I-
all